Hey, Helen here, your host. Great to have you along for the second season of The Beautiful Side of Grief, where we continue to hear from people from all walks of life who have faced or have been involved with heart-wrenching loss and who've come out the other side with so many positives to share with others. I know this may seem like an impossibility for you right here, right now, to be in that space. And believe me, I understand. I lost my own gorgeous 18-year-old daughter and only child in a car accident. Yet, here I am 4 years later, sharing my own journey and those of others in the most heartwarming and joyful way. Each and every one of my guests share their own beautiful insights and their strategies for getting through their grief. And through these stories, I hope you'll find your own way to deal with your grief in whatever form that may take. I'll pop my guest links and any free resources in the episode notes, along with my website address if you'd like to know more about the energy work I do, as that was my lifesaver in my own grief journey. Don't forget to subscribe and like so you can keep informed of each weekly episode. So now let's see who our guest is this week. I want to begin this episode with taking a moment for you to imagine being divinely guided in every single step you take, feeling more alive than you've ever felt, knowing you're always safe, loved, and protected, being free of all struggle, hurt, and loneliness. Is this what it's like in heaven? Can we experience that without being in heaven? This is what we're going to be exploring in the second part of my interview with Brent Satterfield. Now, if you haven't listened to the first episode, I highly recommend that you go back and take a listen. Season 1, episode 17. Now, Brent is a renowned DNA scientist, founder of Inner World Movement, and author of several books, Faith to Produce Miracles and Bringing Heaven Home, both of which I would highly recommend you reading. He has a PhD in bioengineering with an emphasis on entrepreneurship and has a desire to invent low-cost diagnostics for infectious disease to lower the cost of healthcare in the developing world. Oh, and that is such a fantastic desire and mission. I love that. So we're going to delve into his multiple experiences with heaven, which subsequently led him to explore consciousness, faith, and experiences of God in cultures around the world. This is a huge topic, which we won't be able to fully do justice to in the time we have, though I hope what we're able to cover today will give you an introduction to this beautiful realm. And it is my sincere hope that your own journey always be filled with love, light, and hope. So welcome, Brent.
Thank you very much, Helen. That was a beautiful introduction.
Oh, you're so welcome. So we're going to jump into this, boots and all, today, Brent, to understand how NDEs or near-death experiences can present, as they can differ, between people, and attempt to understand the messages and purpose behind these experiences that you've had. Though before we get into that, I'd just like to make it really clear that we're discussing some things that may be outside of what you, our listeners, currently believe. And this discussion is not intended in any way to be disrespectful of your beliefs or belief systems. Rather, it's an opportunity to explore another perspective from which you can take whatever information resonates for you. So, Brent, are you ready?
I am.
Okay, so let's start by recapping on our understanding of what a near-death experience or the equivalent an out-of-body experience is all about. So I want to understand what it looks like, what it feels like, what happens to you. Is it peaceful? Is it scary? So take it away.
So these experiences vary from one person to the next. And a near-death experience is a special category of out-of-body experience where an individual doesn't just find themselves outside of their body, but it happens as they have died. And they become very interesting for, public scrutiny or for scientists to analyze, because in some cases, an individual's brain has died. So there's no brain activity, and yet they're still having an experience in which they come back having seen things from the other side, seen people who've passed on, seen heavenly visions, experienced something of the divine. And as more and more of those experiences are recorded and reported, they're just really fascinating to study. So with respect to the experiences that I've had, they have profoundly changed the way that I see the world. They've completely changed how I think about the world, how I think about life, and the quality of life that I expect, that I look for. It's gone from, the standard, you go to work for most of your life and you just provide for yourself, to looking at life and thinking that's not how it's meant to be at all. There is something deeper, there's something more beautiful, where we can engage with a very loving, deep, and beautiful quality of life, even right now.
Okay, so do you experience like a deep, profound love? What is it? Do you see things? Do you hear things? Or is it just the feeling? Like for you specifically, can you just give us a glimpse of what one of these experiences was like for you as you went into it?
Sure. So again, every experience is unique. And for me, the experiences, they're very hard to relate to other people sometimes, because the vocabulary we've developed in this world is based off of our shared experience of being able to see or hear or taste or smell. And almost everything that you experience in an out-of-body experience is not perceived through those senses. And so it's difficult to convey back in the same vocabulary we use here. That being said, it has a quality that feels more real than life itself, than what we call life. There is a depth to it. There is a substance to it. And I know that there are a small number of experiences where people, they see things that are difficult to see, but the vast majority are more like what I experienced, where an individual finds themselves encompassed by love of a nature that they've never experienced before. And what I mean by that is, here in this world, when we use the word love, we're defining it based off of what we've experienced from our parents, what we've experienced from society. And none of the love that we've experienced in this world is like the love that's experienced on the other side. That love on the other side is one that doesn't expect things from us. It doesn't demand things from us. It doesn't tell us we should be something or should not be something. It is the kind of love that liberates you in this moment to feel joy exactly as you are, to feel loved, to feel enveloped, to see the wisdom of everything that's been. Instead of condemning you for it, it releases you from that condemnation.
So it's completely unconditional. It's just, this is it. And this is who you are. And you're just perfect as you are.
Yeah. And everything that transpires in that space, at least as far as I experienced, it seems calculated to release you more into that unconditional love, to open you so you can feel it more, so you can experience it more.
So this is also called crossing the veil, isn't it? And that's what, when we come in our earthbound form, we lose the memories of what we've experienced previously, don't we? And so why is that? Why can't we all just have NDEs and know what our purpose is and just get on with doing the job as we should be doing it?
That's a wonderful question. You'd think that if there were an objective in this life that we were supposed to accomplish, that life would come with an instruction manual, and one that we don't disagree on, because it seems like there's a bunch of different cultures and religions that each present one. But it seems that, at least the way that I experienced it, that we are perfectly enveloped and loved in this moment. And we may not realize that because we're constantly in this world comparing ourselves to other people. But when I got to the other side, like all that comparison lifted off. And then for the first time, I was able to feel how beautiful my life was, not by virtue of how it compares to anybody else's life, but just as it exists, my life. And the sense I got is that the same applies to every other person in this world. And so whether you're having, these beautiful out-of-body experiences, or you're just plodding through life, there is a wisdom in what you're experiencing. And for me, having the experiences, it gave me permission to let go, to relax and say, okay, even if life's not moving as fast as I think it ought to, it's perfect. It really is perfect. And I can relax into this moment and start to feel a little bit more of heaven today?
That is so important to understand, because I know that it took me losing my precious child to actually just let everything go and say, okay, what the heck? I'm just going to live my life now. I don't care what anybody thinks about it, because, I'd gone through what I thought was the worst possible thing I could experience. And so in effect, that gave me freedom. And from that freedom, I've been able to now experience like an amazing level of joy and happiness that I'd never, ever before in my life experienced. And that just came from having that awareness and that consciousness around that and allowing myself to go down that journey. And I understand a lot of people are having awakenings at this time. So is that the same thing? Is this the same sort of thing, like what I just explained, and having an awakening?
Yeah. So what you went through, I would very much call that an awakening. And there's different types. I think a lot of people, when they discuss awakenings, they're talking about the more dramatic ones where you have like a really marvelous experience and then supposedly you come out the other side different. But I think the more real and sincere awakenings are like the ones that you experienced, where something happens and it takes you a period of years to digest that experience, to like really extract from it the nutrition, the spiritual nutrition that lets you start to see life with more joy and in a more relaxed state. So I love what you just described.
Yeah. Wow. Seriously, I could never imagine that the worst possible experience would become my best version of being able to live. And that's truly why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I want people to understand that out of tragedy can come such immense good and really incredible feelings. So you've studied hundreds of the, because that's the scientific side of you, just never happy just to accept. So you've studied loads and loads of them. And regardless of the religion they practice, you found that there was a no judgment that was a common theme throughout them all. Can you explain what that is about having no judgment?
Sure. So like you said, I've studied hundreds of near-death experiences after my own experiences, just because I became really curious. What are other people experiencing? And it took me outside of my own rigid mindset, where suddenly, instead of only wanting to study things that conform to my beliefs, I wanted to just see how much is out there. I really wanted to learn from a more open state of being. And like you said, the no judgment theme is very common. And there are a few people that'll come back and they'll talk about judgment on the other side. But the ironic thing is, when I've read their experiences, more often than not, what they experienced was no judgment. And then they come back and they start talking about judgment.
Okay. Yeah.
And I find that fascinating. But the majority of people who come back, they experience a state of no judgment in such a way that it disrupts their traditional beliefs. They can no longer come back to the religious way of thinking that they had before and still look at themselves as though they're inferior or that they're not loved. It just changes the way that they relate to their spiritual inclinations.
So what does no judgment actually mean?
I think a lot of my perspectives on this have come about as I've had those years after the experiences to reflect on it and to really feel deeply into it. Because at the time, it just feels like absolute euphoria, and like God himself, the divine, is just enveloping you and embracing you and loving you as you are. And as time has gone on, I've seen another pattern in that, which is, it's not even that God was loving you. I mean, God was loving you, yes, but that there was something that happened in your own heart, that by virtue of being in that space for the first time, all those self-condemning voices, those critical voices that are constantly playing, and even if the voice isn't playing, the negative feeling of, oh, I should be doing this or I should be doing that, all of that lifts. So no judgment. It's not even that really talking about what God is doing or God is not doing. It's more about you're in a place where for the first time you stop judging yourself.
Yeah. And stop being so harsh on ourselves for everything that we've experienced, the good, the bad, the ugly, because we're so good at doing that, aren't we? We live in a world, I think, that's full of more judgment than ever before. So without having an NDE, how can we get to that state of no judgment?
Well, I think the first part of that is to feel that little bit of peace or that little bit of hope that kind of ignites inside of you when you hear a conversation like this that says, maybe the other side is more kind than we think it is. Maybe it's more loving. Maybe it's more accepting. And at some point, if it starts to resonate inside the heart, then it gives you permission to try an experiment where you try becoming aware of the voices that are going on in your day, where you start to feel something or hear something that creates a negative feeling inside of you, and you step back from it for a moment instead of assuming it's true. Because I think most of us, we grew up in these environments where our parents were heavily critical of us, society was critical of us, and so the voices inside of us are just a reflection of the environments we grew up in. We've never experienced a space where we have been so loved that we understand what it is to live without criticism.
And I love that term where they talk of that you were born perfect, that you were born exactly as you needed to be, and that there is nothing wrong with you. Yet, like you're saying, we go through all this conditioning, whether it's from our parents, from school, from our friends, from society, from the world. And then suddenly we find ourselves like hyper critical of what we're doing and how we're doing it instead of just allowing ourselves to be. And it's hard to break away from that. So yeah, it might take a bit of time for us to get to that state, do you think?
It does. I mean, I'm still working on it. And, I've had these experiences, but the one thing that the experiences gave me was a perspective of, wait a minute, the way that I'm treating myself on a daily basis is not the way that we're treated on the other side. And so if I want to experience any measure of heaven on earth, it's not just about how I treat other people. It actually starts in my own heart. That if I can't be kind to myself first, then I can never truly be kind to another person, because I can never show up in their space and see them for what they are and just love them without all of the conditions and the criteria that everybody heaps on them.
One of the things that I've learned over the past couple of years, which has really, really helped me with that, because I was a bit of a perfectionist, a bit judgmental, to be honest, was to learn to understand that everybody only operates from their level of awareness, and they can only do what they can do, what they know how to do. Once I actually learned that, that allowed me to extend so much more grace to people and try and understand where they're coming from and what their life is, rather than expecting them to live up to my expectations. And that's really something that's helped me. And I'm glad I've actually learned that. I also want to talk about success and because I know that in one of your experiences, you actually came to look at its success in a completely different way from what we tend to look at success. And if you can, I would love for you to share the story of the retreat you were at with the lady in the wheelchair. Do you remember that?
I do. You've been reading some of my other stories. So I attended a conference with Dr. Joe Dispenza. I think one of the things that happened after I started having these experiences, I just wanted to be around other people who were asking deep questions. And Joe Dispenza has asked some really beautiful questions about healing. And he's got some wonderful trainings for those who are interested in pursuing meditation or understanding of self-healing. But I was at one of his retreats, and there was a woman there who'd been in a wheelchair for quite some time. She had a degenerative disease. And during the course of the group healings and the meditations, she was able to get up out of her wheelchair and start walking again. And that was a marvelous thing to see. It very much coincided with some of the feelings that I've had on the other side, which is the way our bodies show up has to do with the degree of kindness and self-love that we have for ourselves. And so if you're struggling with some real need of physical healing, one of the best places to start to support whatever the medical professionals are telling you is to start loving yourself deeply, truly, to spend time with yourself. And there's so much healing that comes from that.
Yeah, that's true. That is so, so true, because I had some really severe chronic conditions and now they're just about zero now since I've learned how to love myself and really like who I am and what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And I cannot recommend that highly enough for people. Actually, forget all paying for expensive courses and treatments and things like that. Start by looking in the mirror and liking who you see there, first of all.
Yeah. And, for me, it's fun because I'll sometimes show people pictures of myself from like 12 years ago and they say, wow, you got younger. You don't look nearly as old as you used to.
Because it literally has a profound effect on every cell in our body. That's where the healing occurs at the cellular level. And it's so, so exciting. So around success, I mean, that was a wonderful story you shared, but the one I was actually thinking of was the one where you had yourself to go up the pole and it was, you had to jump off it and onto a trapeze, was it?
Yes.
And, and you finally overcome that. And yet this lady in the wheelchair also attempted that. But she only got, 2 rungs up the ladder. And and from that, she got the most amazing reception. And it actually changed like your whole perception of success, that it wasn't about the end goal, was it?
Not at all. And yes. So that is one of the stories from my book. And I apologize. I took you the other direction. And so I'd been at an event where, we climbed up this telephone pole, and it's a trust exercise to see, could you climb all the way up to the telephone pole and let go of your fears and stand up on top of it and jump off and grab a trapeze hanging in the distance. And so that was supposed to be the success, that you actually grabbed a hold of your dreams and let go of your fears and everything else. But this older woman in a wheelchair, she was escorted up to the telephone pole. And even though none of us expected her to attempt it, she got out of the wheelchair and started climbing and made it to the second rung on the telephone pole before she fell off. But the fascinating thing was how much everybody there was cheering for her. I mean, louder than the people who succeeded, because she had no chance of making it up that pole. And yet she tried anyway. And that was one of those moments where I was able to make a connection with some of my experiences on the other side and say, wait, we view success upside down in this world. We think the people who make it the farthest in life, who get the biggest income or the top level promotion at work, or who have the best children, or whatever it is that we're measuring our success by, we view that as having arrived at the top of the telephone pole and jumped off successfully. And yet in heaven, the view is completely different. It's not about succeeding. It's not about making it to the end. It's the effort. It's the attempt. It's the faith we have to take that step forward into the unknown, even when all the cards are stacked against us.
Oh, see, I told you it was powerful. Because I think so many of us need to understand that. It's about giving it your best effort. It's about facing your fear and stepping into that. And I feel like so many people are held back by that, by their own fear, by their own guilt, by their own resentment and emotional issues. And I think that's all tied back into judgment as well. So let's talk about living without being in a state of fear.
So where would you like me to take that?
So Like when I read your book, you talk about when you live in a state of fear, you're cutting off the divine light. And it's a light that actually brings you the joy and happiness and contentment and that feeling of success in your life. And so when we're cutting it off by all those emotional negativities that we feel, take it away.
Okay. So I don't know how many people live with this, but I have lived with chronic anxiety for much of my life. And I would have never called it that, except that during these experiences, I began to feel what it was like to not have that, to be outside of the body that was constantly feeling fear and anxiety. For me, it was just normal. It was just everyday life. You wake up and you go through life. And I didn't realize how much anxiety or how much negativity or how much fear was constantly weighing on my body. And I think there are probably a few people out there who have psychological diagnoses and they'd say, yeah, sure, I've got chronic anxiety. But everybody else is probably thinking we're normal. Why? Because we compare ourselves to everybody else who also has chronic anxiety and fear and everything else. And we don't see it as that. We don't feel it. It's in the background. But those emotions are running constantly. And they're what's preventing us here in this world from feeling the divine love that exists on the other side. There are these programs that are just running inside of our body. We didn't necessarily create them. We inherited them from our parents who inherited them from their parents and all the way back. And the reason that these out-of-body experiences have so much power to reveal a different kind of love is that all of a sudden that body of programs is left behind. And now there is our innate state of being divinely loved and held and feeling like we're in the center of the universe. It's just absolutely phenomenal.
So is that the same for everyone who passes across the veil? Are they all embraced in this divine love and acceptance? Because I feel that that's what people want to know. Sometimes they feel that their loved one has struggled so much and they've taken those struggles across the other side and that they still may be holding on to that pain or whatever it is they may be holding on to.
So in my experience, there were aspects of my life that I was holding on to. I mean, there's so much more love. And so it made it easier to hear things and see things. It's like sometimes you sit down with your life partner in this life and they say something about you that you could improve on and you receive it in a critical way. And it's like, oh, that hurts. But on the other side, you're feeling so much love. It doesn't come across as critical. It comes across as, oh, I'm carrying this huge weight. And if I put that down, I'd feel so much better. And so in that space, it wasn't just me and divine intelligence helping me to do that. I had specific teachers sent to me. And for me, coming out of the religious background that I had in Christianity, Jesus was the figure who was most influential to me in that space. That he came and just the way he looked in my eyes, it was the teaching was contained in just the way that he connected with me and the way that he looked at me and the way that he loved me. But even beyond that, in case there was any doubt of the matter, he also used words. And those words, he would talk to me about my life and the patterns that were in my body that were causing me pain. And he would show me a different perspective. It's like he'd take me outside of the perspective I'd had my whole life and then show me a different way of seeing it. And all of a sudden, I'm like, wow, I don't want to carry that weight anymore. Now, I believe that we all have choice on the other side. If we're really enjoying carrying that weight, then heaven loves us enough to let us keep carrying it. Okay. But I think for most of us, we are going to get to the other side and say, wow, that was heavy. I don't want to carry that anymore. And we're going to see things a lot differently than we see it right now.
How incredible that you got to have a first-hand experience with Jesus. And I know that you've had that on at multiple times, not necessarily seeing him, but certainly hearing him. How did you know it was him?
So here, I mean, we rely so much on sight in this world. And so we think if you see somebody, could you have mistaken them? Could you have thought, well, those features are, because, I've certainly seen people in this world where I thought they were somebody else and I was wrong. But on the other side, the way that you see is not with your eyes. I mean, there's visuals, kind of like you're seeing with your eyes, but the way that you see is with your heart. And it's like an energetic signature that is, it's an understanding, it's a feeling, it envelops you, it's part of you. And so even before someone will come into your space in that heavenly space, you will feel it. You know who they are. You know why they're coming. It's like they announce themselves in the energetic space that you're occupying.
Right. Oh, I just love that. So why do you suppose it is that we get given or thrown so many curveballs at us, time and time again? What's the purpose behind all the suffering some of us have to go through?
So this may not be a complete answer, and in fact, I'm sure it's not a complete answer, but it's part of what I saw on the other side. So at a certain point, Jesus asked me if I would like to meet God, and I said yes. And so he took me into a space where I felt more love. Meeting Jesus was my everything just opened up. I thought that there could be no more. And then to meet God, it felt like it was that much more. It was just this understanding of if love had a father or love had a mother, it's like you're opening up to the space where love learned how to be love. And it was a phenomenal experience. And while I was talking to God, there were a series of gifts that were brought to him. And those gifts, no one told me anything, but it's like your mind is working in multiple places at the same time. And you're capable of understanding multiple conversations and kind of downloading, as it were, lifetimes of information in between the sentences that are taking place or that are being communicated. And so one of the things that I felt as I was watching these gifts being presented to God were that these were gifts from me, from my life to him. And they weren't gifts of like, wow, I went and I helped this many people by inventing a DNA test. They weren't the standard types of gifts that we think. They were the gifts that came from me struggling against the curveballs that life had thrown me. Because no one else in this world had ever been in the exact circumstances I'd been in. And the way that I looked at life, the way that I understood life, the way that I tried to relate to truth in those moments, not only the good moments where I would say that I succeeded, but also the ones where I failed, where I maybe made a choice that I shouldn't have made. I wasn't as kind or loving as I should have been. That all of those perspectives were incredibly unique. And somehow, like, that perspective added to, for lack of a better word, it added to God's library, this library of understanding and of knowledge of what it means to be divine. And what I understood is that each one of us in this world are going through something similar, and that we are all mining knowledge for God, mining knowledge. But it's not just for, some dictator in heaven, but it's just a loving being that through every understanding that is created for this loving intelligence, it also comes back to our benefit. Because at some point we get to access all of that knowledge too. And it grows our joy.
Yeah.
So
that's, yeah, sorry.
It seemed that we were working together as a human family to understand at an even deeper level what it means to have divine joy, to take the ceiling off of growth in that divine space.
So that in effect explains as well what I asked you earlier as to why we don't remember everything from previous lives and why we lose that memory as we come onto this earth plane, because otherwise we wouldn't have genuine experiences and experience the hardships that we do. So there would be no learnings from them. So everything we're going through has a purpose, and we just have to understand and have trust and faith. And that sometimes a little more easier said than done.
Yes.
Trust and faith. Yeah. So that segues really, really nicely into my next question for you is that, in your conversations, in particular with Jesus, he played a role in guiding you to some of the experiences you had with other heavens, didn't he? And, I guess most of us think that there's only one heaven, but you've got something else to share with us around that, haven't you?
I do. And, I would have thought that if I were encountering Jesus, that he'd be showing me strictly Christian teachings. But one of the things that I've noticed in not only my own experiences, but other people's near-death experiences, is that frequently God teaches them with expressions and teachings that cross cultures. And one of my favorite near-death experiences is of a Catholic woman who meets God in a way that isn't really supported by Catholic doctrine, because she sees Jesus and God as separate people instead of as being like, the same person. And she is then taught out of the Quran. So she's taught Islamic principles. And then she's further taught Buddhist principles. And it's just fascinating that she's having this experience with God, but instead of teaching her from Christian scripture, he's teaching out of the Quran and out of, Buddhist doctrine. And that just absolutely floored me. But in my own experiences, I found that a lot of the things I was taught, I understood them from the Christian doctrine because I'd spent a lifetime studying biblical teaching. But as time went on and I met other cultures, as I was led to look for ways to bring heaven into the body in this life, that a lot of the teachings that I was looking for, they weren't in the Christian churches. They were in other places, like in Hinduism or in Buddhism, that there was this cross-cultural learning that was necessary to start discovering the kindness and the love that Jesus taught when he was on earth. But even more than that, that each one of these cultures had a set of teachings that would lead you to God in a slightly different way. And the way that they led you to God had a unique feeling, a unique experience. And so as I started to have more than one out-of-body experience and started to experience God through the eyes of different cultures, what I found was the experiences were completely unique. That the way that love was experienced, the way that divinity was experienced, they were almost nothing like each other. They were totally different types of joy. And it reminded me that in the book of Revelation in the Bible, that there are 12 fruits on the tree of life, 12 types of fruit. And it made me really deeply ponder if one of the ways that we maximize our joy in that heavenly space is to comprehend the beauty in each of the different paths, not just to lump them all in together and say they all lead to the same place, but to acknowledge their uniqueness and to extract from them that uniqueness in a way that helps us to experience that divine love more fully.
That's pretty special. And that's really sort of taking us to another, level of thinking around this. But I also want to understand that what do you suppose the purpose of understanding all of this is? It's all very well to know that there are different pathways. People may go and experience heaven, but why have them all separate? Is there a reason why? Because I know that you talk about East meeting West and that we need to have an understanding around that and maybe sort of integrate that. So is this what this is leading to?
I believe that's where we're heading. I mean, as a scientist, I have been at the confluence of multiple disciplines where the molecular biology is merging with the biochemistry, is merging with engineering sciences, is merging with all kinds of other disciplines. And it's where they come together and you get out of the strict traditional way of seeing things that scientists have done in the past, that's in that space that there's the most innovation, there's the most discovery. And I believe it's the same with religion, that religion has isolated or has developed in isolation for many generations. But now that we are kind of running together as a world, we're being challenged with our own internal judgments and our hurts and our fears, and being asked the question, can you let go of that? Can you let go of that and move beyond that to where you can start to appreciate the beauty in another culture in a way that's additive, in a way that's not just additive, but exponential in our potential to grow as individuals and as a society?
So it seems that the opposite is happening at the moment. We're living in a world where it seems like we're becoming separated and boxed into we are this, we are that, more than being integrated. So why?
I don't know about the rest of your listeners, but the people that I interact with and I communicate with, and certainly there's a lot of people in society that are getting full of anger and hurt as the divisiveness increases. But a lot of the people I interact with, they are starting to look at the news and other places that keep trying to divide us and say, I don't like that feeling anymore. That emotion does not fit my internal space. And it's like they've just finally got fed up and they're throwing that out and saying, I want to feel love. I want to feel peace. And so as the world continues to try to divide us more, there are a large number of us who we don't want that anymore. We're done with it. We're ready to let go of that system. And as more and more of us wake up to that and let go of it, there's actually an energetic flow from each one of us into those systems of consciousness. And so as we stop powering it through our attention, as we stop powering it through our anger and our hurt and our upsetness, and we just unplug and we go and find peace, it starts to make it easier for other people to do the same.
Gosh, I just had a conversation with a friend about that exact same thing this morning, about just stepping back from it all. And, it will unfold as it will, but this is the way I need to be living my life and doing what I need to do, which is, not buying into all of that. And your explanation is so, so good around that. And yeah, you did a great job. Sorry for putting you on the spot. And I also want to acknowledge, because what you were talking about earlier is how you became so successful with your DNA technologies, wasn't it? It wasn't you just being a very clever and successful scientist in your own right. It took a whole multitude of other facets all coming together, like your entrepreneurship, the other different, mediums that you were dealing with, for it all to be successful, wasn't it? So it took the whole group, the collective.
I mean, that's the beautiful thing about science, is that somewhere along the line, scientists decided to let go of judgment, at least enough that you can take all these different ideas, and then the more ideas that people have, the faster the learning grows. And I mean, like with the DNA sciences, we've been able to harness the power of everything that was done in the high tech with computers to be able to miniaturize the technology and to grow it and progress it far faster, exponentially faster than any other technology has ever grown. And it's interesting for me to look back at the religious and spiritual models and see people still trying to segregate them and say, well, you're either this one or you're that one. And they want to live by the dogma and the traditions. And I still wondering, like, when is it going to catch on? And we're going to start bridging those boundaries as well and saying, what technology do you have? What understanding do you have that helps me be more what I came to be, that helps me to unlock and exponentially grow in the direction that I'm here to be?
Yeah, because you also talk about in your book, Bringing Heaven Home, about letting go, actually not trying to force things to happen or make them happen as we think they should, to actually step back, just know where you need to go, but step back and let the universe do its thing, so to speak, and open us up to meeting perhaps the people we need to meet or do the things we need to do to make that happen.
It's hard to step outside of our comfort zone, to step into the unknown. But the most amazing things happen when we trust enough to make that choice, when we believe that the universe is loving enough and kind enough to send us the people that we need when we need them, the influences, the thought processes. And so to be able to let go and allow an intelligence more loving than what's going on in our mind to flow through us, to create through us, it's absolutely marvelous.
I know. I've just experienced that myself. I'd read half of your book and I hadn't read the other half. And yeah, pretty upfront here. And I decided to step back from all the social media frenzy, everything that was glittering and shiny that I thought I needed to do and should do. And I stepped back and just thought, what is it my heart is telling me to do? What is it I really need to be doing? And I just chose to trust and have faith in that process. And that's when my world started opening up. That's when people started coming to me, like amazing guests like yourself. And it's just incredible. So for anybody listening to this, I would just encourage you just to trust in the process of why something has happened to you, particularly if it's the loss of a loved one. And what you need to learn and feel from this experience and take from this experience, and trust that and let it take you forward to where you need to go. Because for me, it's been this incredible, beautiful journey. That brings me on to another point, because you haven't had any accidents where you've been on the verge of death or dying to have these, what we call near-death experience or out-of-body experiences. So you were actually drawn to one. You met, years after you had your first two, I think. You then were drawn to somebody very pivotal who could actually take you into that state again. Would you like to share with us, in case somebody's interested, that they don't actually have to die, to come and experience it, and share with us how that happened for you?
Right. So I think the idea of somebody conversing with the divine or having experience with the divine is so foreign to most people that it just takes some tremendous events for them to believe that it could happen and to accept what they're being told by somebody else. And so the idea of a near-death experience, if somebody died, it lets the mind believe, well, okay, that's why they were able to leave their body and go and have that experience and come back. And there are a tremendous number of people that actually have those types of experiences. The Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, I believe, estimates somewhere around 1 in 20 people have a near-death experience. And out of those, a substantial number end up having some kind of an experience with the other side, seeing heaven, having a communication with the divine. But there are even more who have the experience without dying, because the reality is that we're never actually separated from the divine. It is just the appearance of it. It appears like our body is keeping us from communicating with the divine. It appears like in this state, we are so lowly and unworthy that we cannot communicate. But those are the very beliefs that we came here to wrestle with and to overcome, to struggle with the beliefs that have been entrenched in humanity for generations, so that we can finally heal our souls, and through healing our souls, contribute to the healing of all of humanity, until that point where all of us at one time come into that divine space with an incredible amount of joy. I mean, an amount of joy that is just incomprehensible.
Gosh, that's incredible. I love that. So what could life look like for us if we learn to live from our hearts and be of service to others?
It's all in the journey. And I think a lot of times we get destination focused of what could it look like, 10 years from now or 100 years from now. But there is this process of us just learning one step at a time to be a little bit kinder to ourselves. It's like the old concept of how do you move a mountain? And you do it, one shovelful of dirt at a time. It's not an overnight thing. And this process of becoming kind to ourselves, where we can experience divinity in the body, it's not going to be a fast process for most of us. It's just a daily act of waking up and putting your hands on your heart and saying, I love you. And saying, what is it that you most need today? And truly listening, like letting the busyness press pause just for a moment. That busyness of taking care of family or of working or whatever it is that we have going on, and the busyness of all the critical voices, and just stopping and acknowledging that we are alive and it is beautiful to be alive, that this is a worthwhile moment, and that whatever needs to happen today for us to feel loved, to feel joy, that we are going to take that step, that we are going to be our own hero, as it were.
Yeah.
And we're going to listen to what it is our heart truly wants. We're going to give that listening that we've always wanted a friend or a lover or a parent or other family member to give. We're going to listen to our own heart deeply, truly, and show up no matter what happens today. And if today goes rough, we're going to get up tomorrow and do it again. And then as time goes on, day after day, week after week, we're going to find that our space becomes lighter, more peaceful, more joyful. And the amazing thing is we'll find that the world around us starts changing to reflect back that joy as well. It actually changes what shows up in the world around us so that our opportunities start looking more beautiful too.
I think that's a pretty good place to be heading in, a pretty good direction, because, I've said before that my life is so filled with joy and happiness on a daily basis now that I could never, ever have envisaged before. I went through so many traumas. And to know that I can be living in this space now is such a beautiful, beautiful feeling. And I'm grateful every day for that. So, and I love that you say be our own hero, because that's what we need to be. We need to be our own champion, right behind us all the way. So that is incredible. So yeah, just fascinating information that you shared with us today, Brent. So I've just got a couple of more really quick questions to ask you. So what's the best thing that's happened to you? I do this every single time, so I can't not do it with you. What's the best thing that's happened to you either today or this past week?
The best thing that's happened to me today is that my beloved, she decided that she wanted to spend the whole day just giving attention to me. And I've spent the whole day getting massaged and just pampered, and it has been absolutely delightful.
That's why you're looking so calm and chilled, and you've been pampered all day.
I have been. And, she and I have been just in an absolutely delightful relationship. And I think a big part of that is where both of us have been giving the other person the freedom to evolve, to stand behind them and say, I truly want you to have whatever's in your heart. And to not be so selfish to try to cling on to that person, but to keep opening the door for them. And as we open the door for each other, it allows for us to have that kind of growth we've talked about, but in a relationship where we have taken responsibility and ownership for our own emotions to feel love in our own space. And it makes it so easy for the other person to mirror back that growing love that's happening in our own heart.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I'm just a teeny weenie but jealous. Just okay. When you have moments in your day that are not going so well, in fact, they're pretty crappy, how do you pivot from those?
Sometimes I don't. I'm like everybody else. I do have moments where I get really bogged down. And sometimes, you just get through it, you survive. But most of the time, I'm able to recognize that I'm feeling a pretty tough emotion. And my strategies for working through those tough places have gradually evolved because we become kinder to ourselves. We learn more techniques. And whereas I used to be very introverted and wanting to hole up in a closet and just be miserable by myself, little by little, I've learned that for me, I need to go outside of my comfort zone and reach out to people who love me, to take a risk and be vulnerable with them about what's going on in my own heart. I also need to be vulnerable with myself. What am I actually feeling? Because most of the time, the reason we're feeling bad or we think we're feeling bad, like that person cut us off in traffic, that's not really what's going on. There's something else deeper that's going on. And if we take the time to really listen and just kind of put our hands on our heart and say, hello, love, what is it that you're feeling right now? And just listen. And not with any intent to change it or fix it or anything else, but just to witness it. It's amazing how often when we witness an emotion, it releases, it lets go, it changes our day, makes space for us.
Oh my gosh, that just about brought me to tears. Just listening to you. That is so amazing. Yeah, beautiful. What is the thing that you're most proud of doing in your life so far?
The thing that it's probably not what people would think it would be. I mean, after this COVID pandemic, the technology I invented has gone on to impact more than 20 million people in 50 different countries. And so there's this huge impact. And when I was younger, I would have thought that would have been what I'd point to and say, yeah, that's what my life was about. And that was the most important thing. But actually, what I'm most proud of myself for is having the courage to be truly vulnerable with the people that are in my life, to try to show up in this world the same way that I feel like happens on the other side, to be vulnerable even when other people are not kind. And that doesn't mean being weak and being beat up on, but it just means speaking from the heart. And even more than that, I would say, is the courage to confront the belief systems and the patterns that my ancestors gave me, that this world gave me, to stand up to those things at the fear of being called a failure, at the fear of failing my family or even God, to walk up against those fears, to look them right in the eye and to say, you know what, I believe in love more, and I am going to keep moving forward. And I'm not going to let these beliefs shut me down.
Wow. Mic drop. All right. Last one. For our listeners who are listening today, who may have recently or not so recently lost someone really, really precious and special to them, what is a piece of advice that you could give them?
If you love deeply, you're going to feel some deep emotions, and let yourself feel those emotions. My brother died unexpectedly of a drug overdose this was 7 years ago. And that grief hit me like a wave, and I let myself cry. I let myself really, really feel the emotion. Feel it. Give yourself that luxury to feel the emotion deeply. You love that person. You deserve to be able to feel some grief. And at the same time, as that grief begins to move through you, you also deserve to know that they're in a beautiful place where they are being cared for more wonderfully than you could ever care for them in this life. They are being given all the tools, the people, the resources that they need to continue their evolution in the most loving way. And a loving way that we just can't comprehend here. And you also deserve to know that you are loved, that you're not forgotten, and that any relationship which has any depth and any meaning in it, you're going to have the chance to interact with that person or people again.
Yeah. Okay. Tearing up just a little bit here. But yes, seriously. I mean, seriously, that is such amazing advice and parting advice that you can give everyone, our listeners. So, Brent, I would just like to thank you for having so many near-death experiences, that you've gained all this wisdom and knowledge to be able to share with us. And I know that we've only just scratched the surface of what you know and what you've experienced, but I am truly, truly grateful for you giving me a second time round your precious time. And, I just wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Helen. And this is an absolutely beautiful show, and I love our conversation. So thank you for inviting me back.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode today, be sure to share it with others. Hit the subscribe or like button so you can be notified of each weekly episode. Also, let me know how I'm doing, especially if there's more you'd like to know that perhaps we didn't get time to touch on today or in past episodes. And if you're after resources to help you out on this journey, or more about the energy healing work I do, hit the Healing to Be You link That's the word healing, number 2, letter B, letter U.com. So until next time, be kind to you, and thank you for joining us on the beautiful side of grief.